and I'll take my stuff and move out of the way here.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm Greg Peterson. I'm with a group we called the Colorado Ag Water Alliance, or CAWA. And we're an association of most of the ag groups throughout the state. And so I have a board member representing the potato growers, wheat growers, fruit and veg, pork, beef, egg producers, even aquaculture. And most of my job is spent, I probably drive about 40,000 miles a year around the state, meeting with farmers and ranchers in every basin, just talking about water issues, write a lot of grants for farmers and ranchers to go after money for all sorts of projects, a lot of infrastructure projects. And then we also fund our own projects throughout the state, either relating to water use and even water quality. And so that's what I do. And I'm going to give some really broad strokes of water and agriculture. That is an enormous subject, and really just kind of hope that we can go from there. And so I really like this chart. And this is just a pie chart of water use in Colorado. And I think one thing that and maybe this helps me deflect a little bit of the attention away from us in the ag community, but actually most of the water in our state has to leave state lines and meet our compacts. Those are agreements that we've had for quite some time. And so, yeah, most of the water has to leave our state through any of the number of the compacts, the apportionated agreements that we have. And then of that water that's in the state, agriculture uses you'll hear from anywhere from 75, 80, all the way up to 90% of that water is used within the agricultural community. And we get a lot of attention because of that, especially in times lately when it's drier, and it's like, well, why are we bothering with water conservation in indoors? It's all these, what are they doing with all that water? And I'm here to talk a bit about that. And I think what a lot of people don't quite understand is that Colorado is an agricultural state, and not just you're like, oh yeah, I saw some corn out here. There was a few cows. No. We are, for the size that we are punching high above our weight, and we are more like an agricultural powerhouse when it comes to a lot of industries. And I don't think people quite realize that. And I want to really highlight that 85% that we get. What are we doing with that, and what does that actually mean for our community? And so I just wanted to touch on a few things. And first, often, well, what do we even produce here? And we're top 20 nationwide for a number of products. We're top for things like millet. We're number 4 for cattle, number 3 for sheep. One of the biggest producers of winter wheat. Way down in the San Luis Valley, second biggest region of fresh market potatoes in the country. And we are producing a lot of agriculture in this state. And I think that's something that a lot of people, when I would show this a few years ago, they're like, well, marijuana. And it's like, no. And we raise a lot of livestock and a lot of forage in this state. And since we're really talking about this map, you can find, and I can send it to you, it's of all the counties in Colorado, but really just focusing here on the South Platte and also the Republican. When I say the Republican River, who knows what I'm talking about? Okay, good. Because sometimes I'm like, what Republican? Where's the Democrat River? And it's like, no. So this area out here in like Yuma, Kit Carson County, and some of the most in terms of, these are the top of, you have so many counties in northeastern Colorado that are in terms of top 10, and these are gross receipts, agricultural receipts. Weld County is actually in the top 10 in the counties in the country. When you're looking, we're number 5. Top 5 now, generally. And you're talking, up there, it's just really Texas and California counties are dominating that, and then Weld County. Yuma County, they're usually, they're in the top 25. Yuma County produces a ton of corn and livestock, beans, winter wheat. And so then when we're talking about the value that comes out of this, this is one of the most productive, not just, one of the most productive regions in the state, but in the area. And so what does that really look like? So really, we're talking about 1.3 million irrigated acres in the South Platte, which is only about 33% of the actual land that's farmed. A lot of dry land. But that irrigated acreage, it's about 60% of the value. I mean, it makes up a lot of that value that we are generating. And about 8.5 billion in direct secondary economic output, 50,000 jobs, 2.1 billion in labor compensation. And this is actually, and this is statewide, but you do have a lot of this in the South Platte, is on dollars spent in research. Colorado's number 3 after California and Texas. And so there is a ton of research, people that are paying people like Joel throughout this, but not just Joel. I mean, you have a lot of innovative private industries based in Colorado doing research here in ag. And so I want to just, but I mean, yes, there's an economic value to this, but there's also some other values that we really try to highlight in the ag community that we see often, and I don't think we're really good at telling the story about. And that's something that we struggle with. And these are values that we see, and we're worried that you all won't notice until agriculture's gone. And you're wondering, oh, well, it was nice when we had all that habitat or all these other benefits. And one of the ones that we're involved with quite a bit is water quality. And I'm not going to say, oh, agriculture, we have no water quality impacts. We're perfect. No. That's not accurate. But in a lot of areas, especially on the western slope, you have these irrigated meadows. There are some real benefits to irrigated agriculture and water quality. And then also the alternative of this irrigated agriculture of developed lands or dried up lands, those have severe water quality impacts. I mean, if you look at most watersheds throughout the state, and you look at, well, okay, what is the largest contributor of nutrients? It's wastewater treatment plants. Often that's anywhere from 60 to 80, 85%. In many places, I mean, and then in a lot of places, its agriculture ranges from 5 to 15 in some areas, just as much as the natural landscape. It can depend on the type of agriculture. But what we're worried is that irrigated cornfield, that irrigated ranch, right now, that is not only are there going to be other benefits, but in terms of the water quality impact, it's far less severe than any of the alternatives that we could have, whether it's going to be developed or dried up. And then just getting into what we see a lot is habitat. I mean, this is one unfortunate thing, is you don't have a lot of research done on this, and it's very hard to do. But I know there's one, actually, it was done up on north of the Pooter on the New Cache Laputer system up there. And they did a study just on all the seepage losses. When we irrigate, I mean, sometimes we flood irrigate or either sprinklers. I mean, water's going, it doesn't all go to the crop. And when we're running ditches, there's water dripping out of it. And these riparian habitats that form along these ditches, that's not natural. These ones that are at all these ends of these fields, that was not how it used to be out here. And in places, and from the studies that we do have along the eastern plains, I mean, anywhere from 80 to 90% of that riparian habitat is ag irrigation water. And you see that a lot in these drier years, especially when wildlife, they can't find forage. And they're going out onto farms, ranches, and they're eating their crops for whatever forage is available. And that's a huge benefit that these properties provide that we have a really hard time communicating. And it is hard to demonstrate what is the benefit, what is the habitat benefit of this. But I tell people, like I grew up in Littleton, I live there. My community does not support habitat for wildlife. I don't have owls, I don't have bears, I don't have elk, I don't have deer, but these are things that you're going to see in a lot of these agricultural settings. And then just scenery and open spaces. I mean, that's another benefit that these kinds of industries provide besides providing us food. And so one thing that we always try is how do we put a value on this? And this is something that we do struggle with, but just want to highlight that irrigated agriculture, it's not just food. It is habitat. It is scenery. It is recreation. And then what happens when we lose that? and we lose the value. And there is a severe economic value to that. Who here has ever been to Crowley County, Colorado? Okay. Okay, well, yeah, you all have. You don't count. So starting in the 1970s, Crowley County, well, prior to that, Crowley County was an agricultural paradise. You had Sugar City, one of the biggest producers of beets in the region. I mean, huge beet production there. And it was just this agricultural paradise that we had. And then starting in the 1970s, you had individual landowners selling off their water rights. And they did this for really understandable reasons. I mean, I've met some of these people, and it was to send their kid to college. I mean, to buy a car. One family, they didn't even have a dishwasher. But the value that these water rights generated is so much more than a one-time payment can ever equate to. And they started and to the date now, where about 95% of the water in Crowley County is owned by outside municipalities. And Crowley County is #1 in terms of poverty in the state. And usually, and you look at participation in programs like CHIPS, SNAP, every kind of welfare program we have, they're usually in the top 10. They have never been able to recover from this. There's been multiple attempts at bringing in new industries. It does not happen. I mean, that irrigated agriculture in these rural communities, it's not just the direct receipts to those farmers and ranchers. It is all the industries around it. I mean, they thrive on that production agriculture operating. And it's not just them, it's the counties. The amount that counties get from irrigated farmland to dry land is significantly different. And often in many places, these counties immediately, they are severely impacted by this dry up when it occurs. And it doesn't get better. I mean, these are recent pictures of Crowley County. And I work down there pretty often. And right now there's really just about 4,000 acres of irrigated acres left amongst these 9 family farms. And we're trying to figure out, how do we even save what's left of this? Because nothing else since the 70s has really come in to try to deal with this problem that they've had. And this is their economy. And there really isn't much of an alternative. So when we talk about the value of agriculture and what it does and what it might not do, when we lose that, I mean, we do have examples of this throughout the state, and it can be pretty bleak. And it isn't just an impact to them. It's like, it is, I think, really an impact that we're starting to see of food security and being able to produce our own food. And I understand that, I mean, there is a cost to producing food, but as one of my board members, Chris Kraft, he owns a dairy over in Fort Morgan, he'll tell you food's not optional. And we can get it here, and we can get the benefits of agricultural production, or it can come from somewhere else, and we don't get those benefits. And we get a lot of negative consequences with that. And I'm not going to say that, there's no negative environmental impacts of agriculture. That happens, absolutely. And it's something that the community has actually been doing impressive work on really the past 20 years. You can see it in just practices. But working with us to do even better, I think, is really the path forward. Because I think especially now is a time where the community definitely feels like there's a target on their back. And it's like, how much longer are we even going to be able to do this? And are people even going to notice or care when we're gone? And all these other benefits that I believe that we all get besides food, we're really going to miss those if we do lose agriculture. So I think that was all. I don't know if there's much time for questions.
There is time for questions. So, questions. Hold on just a...
I have so many questions in my head. I'm not stressing. My head's exploding right now.
Here, we got to use the mic because we're recording, so that's how people hear. I know. All that pressure.
Here we go. Stand back. So what I see is that we have a growth-based economy, and we have to keep growing.
Talk in the mic.
This is a growth-based economy, and we have to keep growing. And that's what I see is going on here. We have to spread the water thinner in order to keep growing. There's 800 new houses going in north of Mahaffey Park. So what's going to happen when we start cutting back on all the evapotranspiration from the lawns we've been growing for 100 years? What's going to happen to all those non-native trees when the humidity level drops and our atmosphere looks more like the atmosphere on the eastern plains where it's 106 degrees? You know, so, you know, I have all this stuff going on in my head. And I was trained as an environmental population and organismic biologist 50 years ago when we were talking about this. And nobody listened. So here we are 50 years down the road and we're slapping Band-Aids on it. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, you're good.
Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
I'll ask a question. Of that acreage, just out of curiosity, is there hard numbers or estimates of how much of that is corporate, big business farming versus our small farmers who are trying to survive? And that water that they receive, is any of that subsidized? I mean, how cheap is that water for them to be able to farm and produce products that maybe come at a lower price than they should be? Things of that nature. There's issues surrounding that, I believe, and I'm wondering how much we are benefiting locally from some of those big corporate farms and those.
Yeah, and Joel, you might be able to touch better on the corporate. I know this comes up a lot. I don't run into a lot of corporate farms. They exist. They're absolutely there. But they're, if anything, in quite a few communities, they're often ostracized.
Corporate farms are family-owned corporations.
Yeah.
There's 5 kids helping with the farm operation. Len's Farms.
Yeah.
How many kids are in there? They call that a corporate farm, but it's a family-owned business. They set it up as a corporation because of liability and passing it down generations.
I do know that farming in California, for example, at one point was controlled by petroleum companies by much bigger interests. Sorry, I know in other states that's been an issue with farms being owned by outside interests. The bulk of the farms owned by railroad companies, oil, petroleum companies, so forth. Maybe we don't face that in Colorado. I'm curious.
Yeah, well, it's, like Joel mentioned, I think it's 91% of the farms in Colorado are family farms. There's a couple of properties I know that are owned by oil companies on the western slope because back in the 70s, they bought into them because they thought they were going to need water for oil extraction, and that all didn't pan out. Honestly, these are the minority. A bigger component is honestly the trophy ranches on the western slope. I mean, biggest ranch in Ouray County is Ralph Lauren. And you have, and you've also got, you've got a couple of investment firms, and they're out competing what young farmers and ranchers can pay for land and buying that up. And you've got some in Delta County, some over in Mesa County. I'd say those are more of a concern and a larger portion of acreage than any kind of corporate other entity. But I guess the subsidizing water, oh boy, I don't know. If I'm on a ditch or a ditch company, I'm on a ditch, and we all pay assessments every year for that ditch company. And so is it less than what your potable water is? Yeah, I can't drink it. I'd die with the amount of E. coli in it. But this is, and so most ditch companies are set up where people are paying an amount to maintain that infrastructure. And that's what you're paying with your water bill, is to maintain that infrastructure to deliver that water to you. And your tap fee is to add, so that when you have a new structure, is so that your water provider can go out and find new water. So, and with some of these larger projects on the western slope, like the Uncompahgre project, that is a Bureau of Reclamation project, they set their amounts per acre foot of what they charge people, and it's all based on what is it going to take for them to maintain the maintenance on their project. So do they pay less than you per? Yeah, but it's not potable water, and it also costs, in some ways it does cost less, where if you have, I think a good example is like a lot of these ditches owned by a single user, they're not paying anything for that water. but they're also dealing with a ditch that they have to maintain and put the labor into. And also, many of those ditches, you get water for a month, 2 months. You're getting what you pay for. And so in that way, we don't operate in places like California, where you have these really large districts that essentially own and distribute most of the water.
I'm just going to hand it back to you.
Okay.
So, Joel, actually, I think we should, and I don't think we did this for Karen either. I think we should give Greg and Karen a round of applause.